story goes, I used to be a performance poet. By that, I don't mean I was one of those funny ones that does all the rhyming. I was one of the serious ones that didn't rhyme. but not the sort of serious who says sincere stuff about stuff you already sympathise with. You know the sort, think they can change the world with 20 minutes of iambic pentameter. Now, my poetry, if it had a central message at all, it was, is there any point to all of this? Including me. Is anyone really right? And maybe we should just be like, nice? But not in a Russell Brand kind of way, because that's just unrealistic. Like it's feckin' hair. Like, I'll give you an example. I once wrote a show, I have to take a drink before, I love long titles. So, I once wrote a show called How I Learned Everything I Know About Postmodernism from a Comic Book and its Effect on My Life. Or Bob, for those of us prone to breathlessness. Now that show was a look at whether the destruction of religious belief is an inevitable byproduct of our evolutionary steps in thinking since entering the high-speed global communication age. Shortly after that show, I was struck down with quite a serious illness. Coincidence? I think so. I was struck down with fibromyalgia! I always find it best if you introduce your long-term chronic health conditions like you're introducing an American wrestler. Breaks that palpable tension that occurs when you say the name of your illness and it has just too many syllables to be anything other than shite and possibly contagious. Anyone fancy a hug? It's a 50-50, but you can't phone a friend. So look, if you've never heard of fibromyalgia, don't worry about it. I'm not here to make you feel guilty. I hadn't heard about it before I got it. My doctor hadn't heard of it either. The first time he told me about it, he voiced it out phonetically as he read from a Wikipedia page printer. So that'll give you a rough idea what the last 12 years have been like. Mainly poorly researched wishful thinking and a mindfulness retreat at a Buddhist centre in Crumpsall that I'm no longer allowed to talk about publicly. They might be all Zen in that, but they can afford the same lawyers as the Scientologists. Allegedly. Now, it's not actually an illness, it's a syndrome. That's a fancy word for a party pack of plague frogs. Like the first little froggy is called pain. Now, I don't mean nice, leafy, suburban Buddhist centre pain. I mean, get your teeth into that, think about what you think about pain. This is one of those points where I did try write jokes, but I had to come to the realisation that pain isn't funny. Sexy, but not funny. The second main symptom is chronic fatigue. Now, for those of you without medical training, that's always sleepy. And it's not quite as cute as it sounds. Think delusionally drunk, angry young frog that stayed up past its bedtime. And the third symptom is morning stiffness. Not what you were thinking. Real medical condition. Basically, in the morning, I'm properly... Takes me 3 cups of coffee, 7 cigarettes, and 4 visits to the toilet before I feel like a little frog. Oh, actually, now that my doctor's seen this show, 20 minutes of light stretching and a Nicorette patch. And all of that before I feel like a little frog that's found sobriety. And some mornings, that can be a lethal combination. Oh, lethal isn't a good word to use about a chronic health condition. Let's say life-altering. So much so, I found I had more important things to worry about than poetry. Now, I did try to keep performing because I've got the low self-esteem issues of every performer ever. Please love me! Please. So I I experimented with different art forms, and then I found improvisation. It's the most fibro-friendly art form in the world. No writing, no editing, no rehearsing, just show up and talk shite. I loved it so much I created a religion, and I became the Reverend Conor of the Holy Church of the Improvised Word. The practical, artistic and psychosexual purposes of the dressing up as the priest have yet to be fully resolved. Actually, somebody once asked me about my artistic process as the priest. Like I had one. But they came up to me after a gig and they asked me a question that changed my life. They came up to me and was like, excuse me, Mr. A, loved your set, by the way. Most moving 20 minutes of iambic pentameter of my life. But me and my friends here, we were like pondering your artistic process. It was a poetry event. They all talk like that. But we had a question and we were wondering, how did we put it? Yes. Why do you hate yourself so much? I know, we weren't the kind of friends for that sort of talk. But in their defence, I had just done a 20-minute improvised piece about mass murderers Fred and Rose West going to a post-evangelical prayer meeting in Birmingham in the early 90s. So, you know, contextually, an appropriate question. Now, it didn't change my life straight away. I'm not stupid enough to take advice from a poet. Never trust them. They'd sell their souls for a nationwide advert. The high proportion of poets in tonight who didn't make the audition. Now, it didn't change my life straight away, but it did create this little slow puncture in my, because I can't swim, Lilo of denial! Or as I like to call it, the good ship. I'm grand. The thing was, I wasn't grand. I was struggling on a holistic level. Like, people who were dead supportive while they waited for me to get better from a chronic health condition. They'd say nice things like, don't let the fibro break you, yeah? Keep getting back up on the horse. Oh yeah, could you lend us some of your tramadol? But the truth of the matter was, and still is, my metaphorical horse is actually the donkey from the board game Buckaroo. So a bit like that donkey, I eventually stopped. I stopped fighting the fibro, stopped breaking myself for applause, stopped taking those late night lonely train replacement bus services from a gig in Hull to two skinheads and their outrageously racist granny. And I just stopped. And I went into therapy. A very natural, artistic cliche. But look, before you get all judgy in that, I was unemployed, I had nothing better to do with my afternoon, and I found one who was willing to see me for less than minimum wage. And much more importantly, I was desperate for help. Now, when I say therapy, you know when you do something stupid at the Christmas office party and HR get involved and you have to do 6 weeks of mandatory CBT so they can secretly check that you're not a sociopath? I don't mean that kind. I mean the kind, when you start to take it seriously, they will say things like this to you. Excuse me, Mr. A? Miss, we'll circle back to that. But for the moment, we would like it if you would stay out of a relationship for the next 2 years. Like I wasn't fucking depressed enough as it was. But a compliment, they thought I was capable of getting into a relationship. Wasn't, damned. Semantics. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't mind the whole 2-year thing. I spend a lot of my time either single or soon to be single. So it wasn't so much of a hassle. And anyway, they offer you alternatives to human relationships. They suggest you get a plant, and if you can keep that alive for a year, then you can get a pet, and if you keep that alive for a year, then you might be ready for a human relationship. Look at me! I'm a consistent caregiver! Love me and my imaginary kitty! It's okay, he's imaginary. Now, if you were in my home, you would realise I am top of group therapy at keeping plants alive. I'm not so good with cats. I'm I'm on my second one. Jamie number 2. Jamie number 1 had to move to the country. Through no fault of my own. Just one day he decided he didn't want to live with me anymore. Oh, thank you. I had a safety line in case you didn't go on. I was going to call you all sociopaths, but I won't. When I started the whole therapy thing, I thought I was going in because of the fibromyalgia. Turned out I had a couple of pre-existing issues. How dare you? Namely, I'm shit at life. Especially this interpersonal bit you're doing out there. But of course I had those problems. I'd tried to be a professional performance poet. Which turns out is a pathology all of its own. No, like seriously, in sessions, if I wasn't talking about fibromyalgia and the awful effect it was having on my life, I was wasting sessions going on about being an artist and needing to express my love me! Please! So eventually, Terry had enough of this. And one day, he stopped me mid-maudlin. And he said, I think I know what's wrong with you. Oh my God, you wet myself. Tell me, what is it? What is it? Well, I think you might be suffering from MAD. My God, what's that? Oh wait, that's only one syllable. Cool. Oh yeah, and please let it not be my fault. Well, Conor, I think you might be suffering from moaning artist disease. Trust me to get a sarcastic therapist. That's karma for you. So, look, in accordance with information I provided to my disabilities benefit provider, I have to have a break about every 15 or 20 minutes. So at this point, I had been hoping to introduce you to Terry, but it turns out no matter how much he slides his sliding scale, I can't afford his hourly rate for public speaking. So instead, I've gotten this owl. And he's made a short little video from a transcript that Terry wrote. So roll VT number 1.